Hi, my name is Richard Leiter, a self-published author of literary fiction, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Thoughts on Writing. Okay, so today I thought I would try to do a review of the novel Cosmos by Witold Gombrowicz. There are a couple of, not too many people have done a review of this novel that I found so far on YouTube. So I thought I'd try to do it, and it's going to be kind of a lopsided, strange review, I think. Let me begin this way. I was browsing on the internet a couple of days ago, and I happened to come across a podcast given by a man named Fred Davis on the topic of glimpsing. I don't know anything about Fred Davis, never heard of him before, never came across him before. In the About section of his of the video that I was watching, this is what Fred Davis says about himself. Fred Davis is an independent, non-dual spiritual teacher. He is the creator of The Living Method of Spiritual Awakening, which has introduced hundreds of people around the world to their true nature. He is also the creator and editor of the popular website awakeningclaritynow.com. And there's a few more lines in the description. So he's a spiritual teacher that I've never heard of before. And Fred Davis was giving a talk in this particular podcast about glimpsing, G-L-I-M-P-S-I-N-G. And as soon as I saw this podcast, I didn't know anything about him. I immediately thought of a poem that I had written about, I don't know, maybe 6 months before this experience I had. I knew nothing about him, and yet I wrote this poem, which was, the subject of which was indeed glimpsing. It's a very short poem. Let me read it to you now. So I wrote in this poem, driving to town to see the dentist in late October, the bluish-gray strip of the road stretches before me, straddled by the fall colors of the trees. I think to myself, these trees on either side of me, they are what becomes of us after we die. We return to nature again. I mean, we were always a part of it, even though our superior intellects and our superior egos are always tricking us into believing that we are somehow separate from it, even the masters of it. It's a shabby trick, although I still fall for it. Not quite sure why I'm not falling for it now. All I can say about it is this. Sometimes I glimpse things when I am not focusing directly on them. It's a peripheral kind of understanding which I can't plan for and which I can't control. It just kind of happens when it wants to happen. And I just have to be there when it decides to do that. So that's the poem. So obviously I was interested in this whole subject of glimpsing, of not concentrating on a specific idea or subject, and then something that you feel is important just kind of comes to you. The clouds part, and you seem to see something that's important, and then just as mysteriously the clouds come again, and the sudden insight you had disappears. That's what glimpsing is to me, and I think that's what Fred Davis was talking about. So I was struck by the fact that I stumbled across this preoccupation that I have. Now, what makes it even more interesting is that right after listening to this podcast by Fred Davis, I listened to another podcast by a man named Jorge. Never heard of Jorge, never visited his website, never saw any of his podcasts. Same thing to me. And Jorge has a channel on YouTube called Jorge's Corner. And this is how Jorge describes his channel. He says, "Hello, my friends. Welcome to this little corner of the world. I use this space to share my thoughts on things that interest me: books, film, music, faith, language, and life in general." And he has a few more lines after that as well. So I'm listening to Jorge speak, who is wonderful. He's wonderfully articulate. One of the most articulate people I've ever come across on the internet. And anyway, so he's talking about a Spanish author. Actually, the author is a Uruguayan author by the name of Juan Carlos Onetti, Onetti. And he really likes Juan Carlos Onetti, and he's reviewing Onetti's short stories. And the short story that he likes the most is a short story called A Dream Come True. And just by coincidence, I guess, I just happen to have that short story. I have it in a collection of short stories called Fiction of the Absurd. Fiction of the Absurd. Pratfalls in the Void. They have short stories or excerpts of novels from different authors around the world. There's the first chapter of Witold Gombrowicz's Cosmos is in this collection, which is how I was introduced to Gombrowicz. And it has A Dream Come True by Juan Carlos Onetti. So immediately after listening to Jorge in Jorge's Corner, I picked up this book book of short stories, and I read A Dream Come True. And I really liked it a lot. It's a very, very mysterious short story. It's a very simple short story, and yet a very mysterious one. And I'm not going to give you the breakdown of what the story's about, the plot, but the point of it is, for me anyway, the main character, or the narrator of the story, seems to have glimpsed something very momentous at the end of the story. The way the story is written, at the very end of it, the author writes, "It was all clear to me. It was all clear. Like one of those things you know as a child, but later on find words are useless to explain." And when I read that, as I say, I thought, this is just another way of saying that he glimpsed something. It's something which you sense is very, very important, and yet you can't quite put your finger on what it is. Well, this is the nature of glimpsing to me. So now I'm thinking to myself, well, this is very interesting. First we have Fred Davis giving a talk about glimpsing, and then we have me having written this poem about glimpsing, and then we have Juan Carlos Onetti writing a story which kind of deals with glimpsing, which is being reviewed by Jorge from Jorge's Corner, who loves this story about glimpsing. So I say, is this a coincidence that all four of these things seem to have come to me, and nothing more than a coincidence? Or is there something more to it? Is the universe, for lack of a better term, is the universe trying to tell me something? But I'm just too dense to see it yet. It's something like Jung's term synchronicity, where there seem to be two unrelated events, but they're not really unrelated, or maybe they are unrelated. So I was thinking about this. What is the meaning behind all of this? Is there a meaning behind all of this? Okay, now we're getting to Cosmos by Gombrowicz. And as soon as I had these thoughts about these seeming connections of glimpsing and all these different characters I just talked about, I remembered that I had just read, prior to having read A Dream Come True by Onetti and going to Jorge's Corner. Prior to that, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I had just finished reading Cosmos by Gombrowicz. And here's the thing about Cosmos. Cosmos is kind of a comedic or absurdist tale in which a Polish student wants to take a sort of a vacation from his studies. He goes to a Polish bed and breakfast, I guess you'd call it, to just chill out. And on the way to the bed and breakfast, he sees a sparrow hanging by its neck by a piece of wire, which is a very unusual thing to see. You know, it looks like somebody consciously did that, purposely hung the sparrow there on a branch of a tree. And the story develops, and at a later point in the story, somebody tells him that he saw, that this other person saw a chicken which was hanged by a branch. And this student in Cosmos thinks, what a coincidence. And then as the story develops, he looks at the wall of the room in which he's staying in this bed and breakfast, and he thinks he sees an arrow on the wall. And he wonders, is it really an arrow pointing in a certain direction, or is this just my imagination? So he and his buddy, another student, I think, they both follow the direction of this arrow one day. And they come to a wall, a garden wall in the bed and breakfast surroundings. And when they get to the wall, they see a piece of wood which is hanging by a string. And the main character in Cosmos is thinking, is this a coincidence? Is there some relationship between these things? Is somebody playing a practical joke on me? Are the people who own this bed and breakfast, are they getting a rise out of me? What's going on here? And so the upshot of this novel is that whatever he does and wherever he goes and whatever he sees, this main character is always thinking about the relationship between seemingly unrelated things. He keeps wondering, is there some kind of a hidden meaning in all of this? That's basically the plot of the novel. He's constantly obsessing for some kind of a grand, total meaning in everything. And these are all little signs and clues that he seems to perceive along the way. This is the novel. So Gombrowicz is kind of saying that man seems to have this drive, this very fundamental, deep drive to find meaning in things, even if there is no meaning, to find relationships in things which may not have any relationship between them. He says man is born in chaos, and yet from the moment man is born, he's always trying to find a way to create form out of that chaos, and whatever he does. And a good example would be, we look up at the stars at night. We see countless stars chaotically spread across the night sky. That's all they are. But man, with this drive to create form out of chaos, he sees patterns in them. He sees constellations. He sees one pattern. He sees one pattern that looks as if it's a figure who has a belt and he has a sword. He's holding a sword of some type, and he's got another hand up here, and he's got two legs, and man calls this particular pattern of stars Orion the Hunter, or he calls another pattern that looks like a Big Dipper, so he calls it the Big Dipper. But there is no pattern. It's just man's obsessive search to try to find a pattern, a form, a meaning out of all that chaos. Otherwise, apparently, life is just unbearable for him. I mean, another example, even a better example, would be, well, human beings are human. We're alive. We're finite. We are alive now, and then we're going to die. We don't know anything about the experience of death, of being dead. All we know is being alive through our human bodies. And yet, we think that we know what it is like to die, what it is like to what death is all about. We think we know what God is. God and death are kind of the same thing, aren't they? They're not human. They're beyond human. Nature, God, immortality. Human beings cannot know that. We cannot know that which is not alive. We can only know that which is alive. And yet we think that we can know that which is not alive. We have all of these religions, all of these beliefs, all of these sacred texts that have been written, every one of them done to try to bridge the gap between man and the unknowable. If there is no way of knowing what God is, well, by God, we'll find a way of finding out what he's all about. For instance, we use our very, very clever minds in the following way. We say, okay, man says, we can't know God. We can't know the unknowable, the omniscient, the omnipresent. However, God spoke to one of us, Moses, or this one or that one. He spoke to him, and he revealed himself to him. So there's the catch, you see. He revealed himself to this particular special person. We call him a prophet, maybe. And the prophet then wrote a series of texts. And so through these texts, we know what the unknowable is. It's a very clever kind of catch-22 that man or rationalization that man devises to try to know the unknowable. But it's all just a game. It's all just fun and games. It's all a big pony show. Man cannot know what lies beyond the grave. And yet, how much do we have written about what lies beyond the grave? How many people, how many books seem to be experts on every aspect of what lies beyond the grave? Man wants to carve form out of chaos. It's a very, very deeply embedded drive which human beings have. And this seems to be what Gombrowicz is all about. And in this novel, Cosmos, he is actually taking it to an absurd extreme, this search for meaning, by showing us this kind of ridiculously obsessive Polish student who's trying to find relationships between a hanged sparrow and a piece of wood, and God knows what else. He cannot accept the fact that we do not know what this pattern or this meaning is, or whether there is a meaning or pattern at all. So in a way, I was thinking about all of these coincidences. Fred Davis, my poem, Jorge's Corner, Juan Carlos Onetti, and I'm thinking, just like this Polish student was thinking in the novel Cosmos, I'm thinking, is there some kind of a grand scheme to this, some kind of a meaning to it, which I have to meditate on, and which I have to obsess over, and maybe I'll get it. And I actually kind of did that for a while. I kind of did in real life what Gombrowicz's student did in his novel Cosmos. But you know something? In the end, all of these coincidences, to my way of thinking, all of these coincidences, as seductive and as provocative and as enticing as they all are, at the end of the day, are just coincidences. They're very provocative, but we'll never really know for sure if they mean anything or if they don't mean anything. All that we know is that we're going to keep on obsessing about them for God knows how long. It's kind of like a carrot being dangled in front of a donkey's nose. The donkey always feels that he will be able to get to the carrot, eat the carrot. He never does, he never can, and all that the donkey does is keep walking and walking and walking further, forever. And isn't that what we do? We always think we're on the cusp of some kind of ultimate knowledge. We always think we're going to put everything together in one ultimate, overpowering, shattering experience. That's what thinking about things are. And so we keep thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And we never do get to that ultimate realization. That, to me, is the meaning behind cosmos. And I think this experience I had of encountering all these different people just brought this home to me. It brought home just how provocative this notion of obsessing or thinking about coincidences in the hope that one will ultimately discover that they are not coincidences, but something else, something that has meaning. I was reminded of all this by this weird experience I had. And this is the best way that I know to review Cosmos by Gombrowicz. So that's it. Like I say, this is kind of a very bizarre, strange, weird review. And thank you very much.